Since winning Super Bowl 47, the Baltimore Ravens are a very, very average 31-33. Brendan Albert joins me back again. It's time to talk about the Ravens. That is your team. So this is going to be a killer preview.
I'm pretty excited about talking about the real Bird Gang.
The real Bird Gang. Ha! Yeah, not the real Bird Gang. Not the real one at all. But we will talk about them right now. So Joe Flacco, this is the question I want to start with. So he's coming off the ACL injury from last year. Now, you say he looked all right. That was pre-show. But the question I want to ask, all right, so they've been average 31-33. They paid Joe Flacco a lot of money, $120 million. That was the contract that kind of set the precedent for all the other quarterbacks. Is that contract hurting the team?
So on the surface, the answer everyone says is, oh, yes. But when you really look at where all these other contract was, first off, Flacco had the Ravens at gunpoint. And kudos to him. He was in a contract year, and he went out and won a Super Bowl. So that is literally the worst-case scenario for a general manager in terms of contract negotiations. So that's like the worst possible thing. Second thing is Baltimore's never had a good quarterback situation. They never have. So when they finally get one, they have to invest big because unfortunately they haven't shown the ability to continuously put in a good quarterback situation around them. So unfortunately Flacco truly had him at gunpoint. So Flacco gets that big deal and now he's, paid through the roof. Understood. But now, since obviously that was several years ago, it was back in 2014, now so many more quarterbacks have been paid more than him that he's actually the 12th highest paid quarterback in the NFL. Personally, as far as talent, I think Joe Flacco's probably in that 12th to 16th best quarterback in the NFL. So with where he's getting paid, I'm okay with it. Some of the guys that are getting paid more than him include Alex Smith, Brock Osweiler, Ryan Tannehill, and then we got Andy Dalton. And then you got some guys who are really darn good. Derek Carr, Andrew Luck, Rodgers, Cam Newton, etc. So with where his contract is, that's certainly a big blow to the Baltimore Ravens cap. Some of the other big things they did, which I really hated, Mike Wallace, he's currently making $8 million, but he had a great year last year, so it's hard to argue that he didn't earn every dime of that. Ben Watson getting $4 million. Then they have big money in the offensive line between two players who are outstanding in Marshall Yanda and Ronnie Stanley. Both of those guys very, very deserving of that. Then this offseason, the Ravens had pretty much a decision. Do we want to save money for Timmy Jarnigan, or do we want to spend it on Brandon Williams? They opted to trade Timmy Jarnigan for the Eagles, which I'm happy with. They ended up getting a couple picks higher, and then they got Brandon Williams paid, so about $11 million a year. So there's a big money there. Suggs making about $7 million, which I think is very appropriate for where he is in his career right now. But the big question mark is going to be Jimmy Smith. Jimmy Smith's a corner who consistently cannot stay healthy. He's getting close to $13 million a year. That's a lot of money for a guy who typically only plays 12 games a year. So to me, is Flacco's contract a concern? Not really. I would probably say it's closer to Jimmy Smith's.
Yeah. All right. Here's the next thing I want to talk about. When you think of the Ravens, you think of tough, hard-nosed, smash football, play a lot of defense, run the football. Well, guess what? They were third in the NFL last year in pass attempts, throwing the ball in Baltimore. Why so much?
It is a very interesting change of pace because everyone knows when you watch Flacco, his best ability is a vertical ball and play action, right? Well, you lose your best receiver in Steve Smith, and you increase the amount of times you throw the ball. That was really interesting to me. So they brought in Greg Roman. He's been known as a guy in the NFL circles who has really done a good job at increasing teams' running efficiency. I think a big reason was they went out and they drafted Kenneth Dixon, and then he just wasn't able to play most of the season. And then they had a whole bunch of stables of walking question marks carrying the football at running back between, Terrence West and a whole bunch of other guys who just kind of circle the wagons there. So they went out and they brought in Danny Woodhead, but Danny Woodhead's not going to solve your run game. He's only going to help. So I don't think Baltimore really answered anything in terms of with their run situation this upcoming season. But I agree with you, Adrian. That was something that had me interested too.
Yeah, I get the running back spot. It's not the greatest rotation of backs in the world, but I mean, to open up that play action, you got to try and run the ball. And yeah, it just didn't work out for the Ravens last year. I do like the addition of Greg Roman. We'll find out and see if that works. Because if you remember, he was the guy that really spearheaded that 49ers attack and Colin Kaepernick and all that, but has the NFL kind of caught up to him, I guess, so to speak, because he went to Buffalo and they weren't able to run the ball there, not effectively at least, not great at least. So we'll see if he comes in and really makes a difference. Now, I think he is. I like him. I like all the different formations he uses and how he utilizes his running backs. So I think he will definitely help. He's an assistant they hired him for.
A run game assistant, I think, is what they title him as.
Okay, so we'll see. I did like Kenneth Dixon last year as a rookie, well, at least coming out of the draft. We'll see if he can kind of make a leap in year two. So he's the guy to keep an eye on, I think, in terms of the running game.
Oh, certainly. I mean, it's hard not to say him in the run game because everyone else, we know that they're consistently average guys. I mean, Terrence West might be the guy this year who gets the most carries in Baltimore, but I don't think anyone expects him to really take over the opportunities, to really lead the Ravens in rushing for the future. One thing we know about Roman is he's going to force the ball down your throat. He's going to smash it down. I mean, even when, as you said correctly, Adrian, when he was in Buffalo, they ran the ball a ton. They just didn't run it effectively.
Yeah.
So that's what's probably going to happen in Baltimore, I think, this year too.
Yeah. How long have they had Marty Morningway?
Ooh, he's been there 3 years, I want to say.
Jeez, you got to get rid of him ASAP. Because that's a guy that doesn't like to run the ball. That is a really interesting hire for Harbaugh. The fact that he would bring him in.
Well, what's interesting about what Harbaugh does is Harbaugh loves to hire guys who are ex-head coaches or ex-offensive or defensive coaches and get them to be positional coaches, which is really interesting because typically those are the same guys who are leaving after 1 or 2 years. And that's one thing that coaches really done a lot of. Now, obviously, they've won a Super Bowl, and they've been I would say above 500 team consistently, always in that wild card hunt, maybe 1 or 2 games out, not necessarily winning the division, but always probably 2 or 3 games from it. They've done a good job being contenders, which kind of bums me out a little bit sometimes because I almost wish they would just blow it up and start from scratch and do everything, but it's also hard to say, hey, time to blow it up when you're selling tickets, when you're putting yourself in situations where you could be a dark horse to win a Super Bowl any given year.
Well, here's the thing with them. All you got to do is make the postseason.
Yep.
With that team, especially with Flacco in the postseason. That's all you got to do is just make the playoffs. But they just haven't made the playoffs recently.
Yeah, I mean,
how long has it been now?
It's been a couple years. It's also difficult, too, when you have the Steelers and Bengals in there, both teams who are capable of not only winning the division but also winning the wild card. And then you look out west, now we have the Chargers have gotten significantly better. Obviously, the Raiders are the cream of the crop out there. Denver and Kansas City right there. And then you say, hey, you know what? It's not a stretch to say Houston, Jacksonville, Tennessee, or Indy can win a division and take a wild card spot. And then you have Miami as another wild card spot. So in the AFC, there's a lot of threats to take wild card positions. And if you're in a division where 4 of your 6 games are 50-50 shots at best, it's difficult to make a wild card situation if you're in the AFC North.
Yeah, and I'm looking. They haven't won the division since 2012. That's also the same year they last hosted a playoff game. So it's been 5 years. It's been a while. Been since they really won that Super Bowl.
It has been.
Yeah. All right, let's talk wide receivers now. You talked about Mike Wallace earlier. They re-signed him. Now, I didn't like the hire or the move when they made it, but he actually turned out to have a pretty good year for them. Can Brashad Perriman finally break out?
I don't know. I just simply put, I have no clue. I mean, when we talk about the receivers, Baltimore's traditional style has been wait, sign an older veteran receiver, get him to play 2 years, and then go find the next veteran receiver, do it for 2 years. They have I don't like it either. I mean, look, they did it with Derek Mason when he came out of Tennessee. Yeah. Then they went out and got Anquan Bolden. Now they did Steve Smith. Now it's Jerry Maclin.
Holy shit, that is so true.
It's a consistent model. Now, the only times the Ravens really went up and drafted a higher round receiver was Mark Clayton out of Oklahoma, and then Brashad Perriman, out of Central Florida. Now, Perriman, I think his ceiling is going to be a Mike Wallace guy. I never loved the first round pick. But that said, there are really like a handful of general managers and front offices in any professional sport. When they make a pick, the crowd and then usually all the analysts go, ooh, that's going to be a good pick for them. I mean, the Spurs, for example, they could draft a guy out of Latvia who only can dribble with his forehead, and everyone would say, Spurs, they know what they're doing. I can't knock, Ozzie Newsome. He's one of those guys who he has shown for track record. He deserves the benefit of the doubt. But Brashad Perriman, I don't see it. I mean, he's a vertical threat, and the worst thing he does is catch the football. That's kind of important to be a receiver in the NFL. So I'm really not a fan of him. I think there's going to be a big issue. So I think Macklin and Wallace are going to be the 1 and the 2, and Perryman's going to be that slot guy again this season.
Yeah, I'm with you on Perriman. I didn't want it when the Eagles were on the clock and they took Aguilar instead. I was happy, and well, it turns out Aguilar and Perriman are both may not be anything, but yeah, I never thought of the veteran sign an old guy for 2 years model. I never realized they did that, but yeah, you're completely right, and I don't like that. I don't know. I would like to kind of build. Bring up a young receiver, let him build that cohesion with Flacco over years and years and years. But no, they'd rather do it for 2 to 3 year intervals. Now, with that being said, though, you did list the guys that they drafted, Mark Clayton and now Perriman. So their confidence in drafting these guys has to be shot because they can't draft anybody. So maybe that's for the reason to do the 2-year thing too.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think the other thing we see when we look at the Ravens, traditionally speaking, they're going to invest the majority of their salary in the defensive side and the offensive line, and then trying to be effective in the run game, and then just kind of get pieces, around them offensively to kind of stretch the field. That's traditionally what the Ravens have looked to do. I don't love it at all, but I understand. I mean, hey, if they've won 2 Super Bowls, so I mean, it's hard to say it doesn't work when they have shown that they can do it.
Yeah. Who else is good on the roster? I'm looking. Chris Moore. Who else?
No. I mean, from the receiver side, there's not much there. I mean,
nothing else.
No, everyone else here is just, if any of these guys, if Perriman, Chris Matthews, Chris Moore, Michael Panero, if any of those guys catches more than 40 balls, that's a welcome surprise in Baltimore. Yeah. It's just not going to happen. And then even when we look at tight end, this was the biggest thing. As I was standing there in the draft in Philadelphia and the Ravens pick was up, I said, there's no question in my mind. Baltimore should be in a dead sprint to go and drop off the O.J. Howard selection here. There was no doubt in my mind that was the pick they should have made. And then they drafted Marlon Humphrey. He was actually the corner, and Adrian, you and I talked about this before. He's the corner I least liked in this NFL draft. But again, Baltimore, traditionally speaking, invests heavy on the defense, and we'll figure out offense later. But when we look at the tight ends, I mean, Benjamin Watson's probably going to be the starting tight end. Then you have Crockett Gilmore and Max Williams, a guy from Minnesota who was supposed to be something really special, and he's been a walking question mark too. There's nothing going on in this offense. It's bad. And the only good things they have is they have the future in Ronnie Stanley, which looks very bright. Yep. Yanda is still the best guard in the NFL, and he might go down as the best Ravens offensive lineman ever and one of the best guards ever. Then you look on the rest of the offensive line, and there's a lot of question marks there.
Yeah, I'm thinking about this offense now as you're kind of speaking there, and I'm just like, how are they going to score points? How are they going to do it? What are they going to do?
It's rough. I mean, honestly, every time the Ravens somehow score points, I'm very impressed with the play calling. That's really what Baltimore traditionally has been. They're just not they've never been an offense who really wants to score more than 24 points. They've always said, hey, if we get to 24, we're going to win. And we'll probably get, maybe a turnover in a short field to give the offense at least one touchdown kind of thing. So that said, They're kind of one of the few teams in the NFL who still goes a defensive first approach. I mean, we look at most of the teams in the NFL are putting more and more investments, draft picks, things of that nature in the offense. Certainly, there's still good defensive units in Seattle and of course, Denver. But if we look at where they're investing their draft picks and they're investing their free agency, it's starting to become more offensively. And Baltimore said, no, we are all in on a defensive approach.
Yeah, I'm looking at their line right now. So I forgot they lost Rick Wagner on the right side. He was good for them. Now, I don't know if it was Rick Wagner or if it was because he got to play next to Yanda, because he played 3 years for them. I thought he was kind of bad last year, but in between. But 3 years ago and then last year, I thought he was good.
Yeah, and honestly, the contract that the Lions gave Rick Wagner, it was not hard for the Ravens to say, hey,
yeah,
good luck to you moving forward. I mean, it just wasn't something that the Ravens really needed to invest in. I mean, Are they one of the bottom third offensive lines in the NFL? Sure they are. But at the same time, that's also because, they started 2 rookies majority of the year last year. And then they also have their center, who's another guy who's one of the younger guys in the NFL as well. So there's not a lot of experience there aside from Yanda. But I think the Ravens offensive line is trending in the right direction.
Yeah, they lost Jeremy Zuta as well at center. So you got Urschel there at center. Alex Lewis, who was a rookie for them last year, he's going to slide inside to guard. Did he play guard last year too?
He did, yep. He played the opposite guard of Yanda.
Gotcha. So I knew he was a tackle coming out of Utah. Stanley was good for them, as you mentioned, and obviously they got Yanda. All right, let's move on to the defensive side of the ball and defensive line. This is a unit that has a lot of depth, I think, and a reason why they were kind of able to get rid of Jernigan. So talk about this unit, and they always draft well along the front 7. They always draft guys, and a guy that's going to be coming up that I really like. I don't even think he's a starter for them, but dude, I love Carl Davis. I am a big Carl Davis guy, kid out of Iowa, and Brandon Williams is a beast. I mean, you talked about him already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Brandon Williams is probably the best nose tackle in the NFL.
Yes.
So for a 3-4 team, I completely understand, and I agreed heavily with why they moved on from Timmy Jernigan, saying we're not going to invest money in you. Instead, we're going to use that money into one of the most important positions in a 3-4 in our nose tackle, and Brandon Williams, who happens to be one of the best nose tackles in the NFL and probably one of the best people doing the Carlton dance in the NFL, which is still one of the funniest things I see. But he's a great investment there, so I like that. Then they have a lot of pieces to rotate at the end position. Willie Henry, Carl Davis is probably more of a nose, but in run situations, you could probably kick out to end. Michael Pierce from Michigan is a guy that they have found a lot of success with. He's had a really, really nice early part of his career so far. Then they went out and got Chris Wormley this year too. So there's a lot of nice pieces Baltimore has along the front 3. Very happy with how they have invested there.
Yeah. Carl Davis is more like a nose tackle for them, which is kind of a shame because he'd be probably starting for a lot of teams, and he's not for the Ravens. So he'll probably be my underrated guy when we get to that point near the end of the show. So all right, so I just looked here. I saw a stat. So despite a lack of offense and a lack of punch on that side of the ball, they still went their first 4 draft picks were defense anyway.
Yep.
That's what the Ravens do.
Yep. Like I said, they go all in on defense. I mean, again, are there teams in the NFL who are defensive first mindset? Absolutely. But I still don't think there's a single team in the NFL who's more defensive minded than the Baltimore Ravens. So, the Ravens, they kind of doubled down back-to-back years on getting edge guys. And they did it twice this year in their early picks, Tyrus Bowser from Houston and Tim Williams.
They've kind of had like a spotty pass rush over recent years, I think. But yeah, I cut you off.
No, I would say you're 100% right. I mean, when we look at their sack production, a lot of it starts and ends with T. Suggs. I mean, that said, he's one of the guys playing the most snaps in the NFL, and he's not exactly a young guy by any means anymore. So, when we're looking at Suggs, he's someone they need to replace. So they have really 3-4 guys in there that all potentially are going to battle to not only be on the Sam linebacker spot opposite of Suggs, but also one of them is probably going to have to replace them.
Yeah, I'm looking at the depth chart right now. Where is that production going to come from? Matthew Judon. You got Bowser Williams, who you mentioned. That's who they took in the draft. What about the second-year guy from Boise, Kamalei Correa? What do you think of him?
So Kamalei was a guy they were really high on drafting, and he had a okay rotational year.
Yeah.
So that kind of explains why they went after Tim Williams and Bowser. I mean, Bowser was a guy that a lot of teams started to really flirt with towards the end of the first into the second. So he's a guy who's a very athletic type of outside backer. Tim Williams is more of the traditional hammer edge rusher coming off the edge. But Tim Williams is a guy who he's got all kind of off-the-field issues that people were circling and questioning with him. So Baltimore's going to have to run a little bit of a committee there on the outside linebacker spot, giving about anywhere from 2 to 4 guys the opportunity to win the job.
Yeah, because I'm looking here. It's tough because the Ravens, if I remember correctly, they gave up a lot of late touchdown drives last year. So if you have a defense that's not getting a good pass rush, and you have a secondary, which is they kind of revamped that a little bit. They drafted Humphrey. Not that Brandon Carr is any good, but whatever. And they brought in Tony Jefferson. So you kind of had a leaky secondary, along with not getting a pass rush. That was a big problem for them last year, wasn't it?
It was a huge problem. It's a huge problem, And I think when you look at teams who look at the Panthers. Panthers got all the way to the Super Bowl, pretty much saying we're going to invest over and over and over. And they did it again this year. Draft another defensive lineman to win with pressure with 4, and then just try to play coverage with 7. And Baltimore is kind of starting to flip that mindset. They're starting to say we're going to invest heavily in our defensive backs. Say what you want about Brandon Carr. I'd probably say he's a top 50 DB in the NFL, which means he's probably a low-end 2, high-end 3. They had a really nice rookie year out of Tavion Young out of Temple. He had a really good special teams year too, and then he tore his ACL this offseason, so he's not going to be playing this season. So then Humphreys kind of slides in to potentially be that number 2, opposite of Jimmy Smith. But again, Jimmy Smith can't stay healthy, and with his contract, Jimmy Smith's my guy in the hot seat. He's got to have a good, healthy year and play well. Otherwise, the Ravens are simply going to say, you know what, your money's too much. We got to move on from you. And then they have probably, in my opinion, probably the best 2 safeties in the NFL between Eric Weddle, who had, I would say, the best year of any safety in the NFL last year, and then Tony Jefferson, which is a great signing there from them. So they're pretty much saying, hey, can we get 15 sacks out of 5 potential outside linebackers, and we'll probably get close to 5 to 10 interceptions from our 4 DBs, and I think that would make them successful. That's Baltimore's motto.
Yeah, during that little bit there that you were talking about, the thing that caught my eye was, so they're making a transition from being more of they want to rush the quarterback, play more on the back end with their secondary. It seems like that's kind of where the NFL is going in general, because a lot of these quarterbacks now, a lot of offenses, you're getting rid of the ball so damn quick. It's hard for the pressure to get to the quarterback. So that is kind of where the game is going, and that's something that Doug Peterson talked about last year with the Eagles, and wanting to mix in coverages and really confuse the quarterback, and because he was saying back in the day, you would blitz a lot and it would work, but now it's not even getting there. It's pointless.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at what the Ravens are really going to try to do, and really, what the reason the Ravens were successful at beating the Patriots, and the reason that even if the Ravens aren't always successful with other teams, the reason that they used to have a really nice identity to beat the Patriots is because they could get pressure with 4. And if you can get pressure with 4 and play coverage with 7, you can beat a lot of really top quarterbacks. Now, they were doing that when they had guys like Suggs, Dumerville, Haloti Ngata. They had 3 really good in that 4 look, and they were able to rotate some other guys in there as well as that 4th rusher and then play 7. Now, the Ravens are trying to do something similar there. The problem is they don't have 4 good rushers yet. They have 4 good run defenders. They're very, very good at stopping the run, but they got to improve heavily at rushing the passer.
Yeah, and they haven't been able to stop the pass over recent years. So, we'll see. All right, I guess we'll get into the predictions, hot seat, all that Jimbo right now. So I've got the Ravens going 9-7, and you talked about this earlier as well. There are going to be a lot of teams in the AFC competing for wild card spots, and I don't know if 9 wins is going to be good enough. I do not have the Ravens in the playoffs, but it wouldn't surprise me if they made it, obviously. But right now I don't have them in. I have them 1 game back of a playoff spot.
I echo that. I have them going 9-7. I mean, I look at a team like the Dolphins. I think they're certainly a wild card team, but what I like more about the Dolphins than the Ravens is the Dolphins essentially have 4 games where they should be favored: 2 in Buffalo, 2 with the Jets. In Baltimore, you have 2 games you're favored in Cleveland. I'll probably say it's a push then between Steelers and a push between the Bengals. So there's 4 games there, but it's a very uphill battle to get a wild card spot. I think 9-7 is appropriate. I could see the Ravens flipping around and going, 6 wins to 10 wins. It's going to be somewhere in there. They're not going to win the division. I think 9 wins is a fair thing. I think they're going to be a team, Adrian. We're going to see probably picking around 18 to 20, and they're probably going to be a game to half a game out of the playoffs looking out next year.
Yeah. Unless they find somebody that can really get after the quarterback, I think it's going to be like a 9-7 type season. But if they find somebody that gets say double-digit sacks or something, somebody just emerges for them. I think they do have some potential, but other than that, I'm not seeing it. I'm seeing 9-7, so that's that. Hot seat. Is it Jimmy Smith for you?
I got 3. Jimmy Smith is on the hot seat because of his contract. His contract is one of the highest paid players for the Baltimore Ravens, and he can't stay healthy. Everyone kind of, and I know in Philly, and rightfully so, people are like, Brandon Carr's not that good. Yeah, you know what, he's not, but you know what, he's on the field more than he is with Jimmy Smith. So if Jimmy Smith gets hurt and then Brandon Carr slides in, now you have Humphreys, well, there's your corners. So, I think Jimmy Smith's on the hot seat because of his contract. I think Perriman's on the hot seat because he hasn't shown he can do anything. And I think Dixon's on the hot seat. He's had 2 seasons in the NFL, and first season he was hurt. Fair, that happens. I understand that. But now he's got a PED suspension. And he was a guy that the Ravens drafted late, and he was supposed to be the answer for what they're going to do in the running back situation. Obviously, the Ravens don't have a ton of faith in him since they went out and signed Danny Woodhead, which really does all the same things that we project that Dixon's going to do. We haven't seen enough of Dixon to definitively say that's his type of game. I think all 3 of those guys are hot seat guys for Baltimore.
All right, I was going to talk about Perriman, but I'll throw an interesting one out there. Maybe you'll agree with, maybe you won't. But John Harbaugh, if they go 6-10 or something, do you think they part ways with him? Because what this reminds me of is, later on in Andy Reid's career, the Eagles started becoming a team they couldn't make the playoffs. And then they just kind of went down each year in terms of the record. And then the dream team happened. He was 8-8, then he was 4-12, and then he was out of Philly. So 95. I'm seeing this. He's 95-64 over 9 years with the Ravens. Made the playoffs 6 times. It's hard for me to believe that they would try to replace him, but maybe they would. I mean, a lot of this core isn't getting any younger. So, is that somewhere they would potentially go? You think?
I don't think he's there just yet, but I do agree he's 1 year away. If Baltimore wins 9 games, I think he's got a little more time. If he goes under 9 wins, next year will be his hot seat year.
That makes sense.
And I say that because you look in the division, I think Marvin Lewis is the guy with the most attention and the most hot seat surrounding him. And I think that kind of saves Harbaugh in the fact that Harbaugh has won a Super Bowl with a team that never had the most offense in his own division, let alone the most offense to win a Super Bowl. So I think he gets another year, but it's close, Adrian. I don't disagree with you. If they do move on for him, the guy, honestly, that would make the most sense for what Baltimore wants to do and traditionally is Matt Patricia from New England.
Yeah.
But I would agree. I think he's got one more year before we're talking hot seat.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So that's where we'll end it. Unless you got underrated guy too.
Well, at least let's kind of talk real quick fantasy. I have two potential fantasy guys. Macklin's going to be the guy I think that most people are going to think about fantasy-wise for him. I think it's not unrealistic for him to be anywhere from 50 to low, maybe high 60s receptions this year, probably 4 or 5 touchdowns, mostly just because, I mean, who else is going to get the ball? I mean, is Mike Wallace really going to get all those targets again this year? I mean, I guess, but that's just because there's not a lot of options around him. So I think there's that. So if for fantasy people out there, Macklin's probably a guy I'm going to take as your 5th, maybe even your 4th receiver on your team. Certainly not someone you'd want as a top 3 option, but maybe a guy, a bench guy. You'll probably get him in rounds 12, 13, 14. A guy who's probably going to get more targets than most people in that round. Otherwise, you're looking at people like Sterling Shepard and Cole Beasley, guys like that. I think that's a fair way to take him. The other fantasy guy I would kind of circle would be West for the Ravens, mostly just because we talked about this earlier with Greg Roman. He's going to force the ball down people's throats. And I think, if you get Terrence West in that 14th, 15th, and latest rounds possible, if you get him there, you're probably not going to get another running back at that point who's going to have close to 100 carries like I project Wes will this season. Is he going to be a starter for you? No way. But where you would draft him, he would have more opportunities to put up some points than the guys around him.
Okay. If I had to pick an underrated guy, it would probably be Tony Jefferson, the safety. Being able to get him from Arizona, I think it does form one of the best safety tandems in the NFL with him and Weddle. You can make the argument potentially the best. I mean, I'd still take Seattle, Earl Thomas, Cam Chancellor, but other than that, it's tough to find another unit that's better. Maybe the Eagles. I mean, people like the Eagles safety tandem, Jenkins and McLeod. I mean, whatever. I don't think that tandem is as great as other people say, but that's just me. But I do like Jefferson and Weddle. So that would be the one. And Carl Davis, I talked about him earlier. I think he's pretty good. So that's that.
Yeah.
You got anybody?
Underrated guys, I think Michael Pierce is someone who doesn't get enough love. And I think we'll see him probably get a little more opportunities. He's pretty much the one-dimensional run stopper right now. Same thing with Carl Davis. Both guys are kind of one-dimensional run stoppers. But, in a 3-down front, if I'm able to tell you 3 guys, including, of course, Brandon Williams, who are really good stopping the run, that's pretty damn impressive. So I think that's kind of something that I'll highlight here. So I would probably say my underrated guy is probably going to be Michael Pierce. This upcoming season, he should have more snaps this year, potentially at the end position. But they got to get some pressure. Now, one thing I will say, as far as Malcolm Humphreys, I didn't love the pick, but Humphreys' biggest problem was tracking vertical game and tracking the ball deep. Well, if you have 2 really good over-the-top safeties in Tony Jefferson and Eric Weddle that can allow Humphrey to be more physical in the quick game, more of a cover 2 type of look, and I think that's probably where Humphrey is going to excel. So Humphrey might actually have a better season now than I would have thought 4 months ago because of the Tony Jefferson signing.
Yeah, that's a good point. So other than that, I think that's about it. I guess you can say Tavon Young's underrated. I didn't mention him because he's hurt, but Young was pretty good as a slot guy for them last year. So that would be the other name. But other than that, we are out of here. That's Brendan Albert. I'm Adrian Fedke. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the double dose. Going to continue our NFL preview. Every Sunday we're bringing Brendan on, and we'll sprinkle in a preview here or there during the week. But basically look out every Sunday afternoon. We'll be doing these, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it. So that's Brendan. I'm Adrian. I'm out.
Appreciate it.
We're out, not just me.